I'm going to say that this text is probably one of the things that really marked me in my early studies in philosophy, because this text actually talks a lot about why it is that we do this pursuit of philosophy. Hi, so today we'll be talking about Spinoza's Tractatus de Intellectus Emendatione. It's Latin, but I have an Italian accent, I know. In French, it is Traité de la réforme de l'entendement et de la meilleure voie à suivre pour parvenir à la connaissance vraie des choses. Hi, my name is Wani, and I'm a philosophy student at La Sorbonne. I actually have the English translation, but I think that it's just easier if I translate this side by side, because when I read it in English and I learned it in French, it's honestly something that doesn't make sense to me, because this is my second take. So let us just begin. So, l'expérience m'avait appris que toutes les occurrences les plus fréquentes de la vie ordinaire sont vaines et futiles. Experience has taught me that the most frequent occurrences in ordinary life is vain and futile. The first thing you can kind of say is that, like, when something is vain and futile, it has no sense, which is not a wrong way to take it, but vain and futile in this sense is something that doesn't last. So something that's restricted to the present. Something is done in vain if it's something that doesn't actually come back in the future, or it's wasted effort. This endeavor is futile. It leads to a dead end, essentially. Continuing on, je voyais que aucune des choses qui étaient pour moi cause ou objet de crainte ne contient rien en soi de bon ni de mauvais. I see that no things that for me as a cause or an object of crainte, like fear, does not contain in and of itself, en soi, de bon ni de mauvais. It is not something that contains anything good or bad. Also, if you just want like a quick, or actually if you want a deeper analysis of what good and bad is, I really recommend my very first video on Spinoza. It's just the idea that nothing is good or bad in and of itself. So when Spinoza says that something is good, it is simply something that is useful to me. And something is useful to me if it increases my puissance d'agir, my power to act, which is basically like continue persevering in reality, continue achieving my opacity in reality. And that is much clearer if you go and watch my video that I recommended. So let me continue. Si c'est né à proportion du mouvement qu'elle excite dans l'âme. So there's a lot to say about this, but essentially it's the idea of how much it excites the soul. The soul is in this state of fluctuation de l'âme, so fluctuation of the soul, when there is doubt, when it oscillates between hope and fear, and when it is at the point that there is an image that obscures the true or adequate idea of what an object actually is. It is the disresolute, dérésolu état de l'âme, so it's just like deresolution, you're not firm on something. And it's basically the idea of a mixture of how it is that nothing is purely good or nothing is purely bad. The example that he gives for something that's not purely good or purely bad is alcohol. So how it is that, yes, alcohol relaxes you, alcohol is like something that helps, you know, most people socialize nowadays, because I guess there's just so much pressure to act in a certain way, so we need to use alcohol as a icebreaker or whatever. But the clear disadvantages of alcohol is evident. The idea that it, you know, has negative consequences on your health. So this is how it is that we experience this contradiction of something that is good on one hand and something that's bad on the other at the same time. So continuing on, je résolus enfin de chercher s'il existait quelque objet fût un bien véritable. I resolute at the end to search if there exists an object that is the veritable good. When we say veritable, it just means authentic, it means absolute, it means something that is perfectly and completely what we can call good, clearly good. In his philosophy, there is like, you know, what is good and what is bad is based on the relationship between two objects. A quick example would be, why is it that when person A is in a relationship with person B, they're terrible, but when they're in a relationship with person C, they're amazing? The idea here is that the person is not in and of themselves good or bad, but it is that we are in good or bad relationships with another person. Just to be clear though, when we say in relation, it's not relative, it's in relation in terms of the rapport, like between two objects. Okay, so let's continue. Capable de se communiquer et par quoi l'âme renoncer à tout autre. Such a veritable good that the soul will renounce everything else peut être affecté uniquement en bien dont la découverte et la possession eussent pour fruit une éternité de joie continue et souveraine. A good that by its discovery and by its possession will bear fruit or result in an eternity of continuous and supreme joy. So here it's basically going back to the idea of vain and futile, right? Something that doesn't last. So is there a good that is not mixed with the bad, that my soul can be affected by, so that I experience this eternity of continuous supreme joy? Je résolus, dis-je, enfin. I resolute, I said, at the end, at first sight. En effet, il semblait inconsidéré. In fact, it does seem inconsidered, so like reckless, like I didn't really think this through. Pour une chose incertaine, d'en vouloir perdre une certaine. For this thing that is not yet certain, because he's just speculating at this point, to want to lose something that is certain. How it is that, okay, in life, I can find good and bad, you know, it's not purely good, it's not purely bad, but that is certain. What is not certain is this veritable good, one that brings me again an eternity of continuous and supreme joy. Je voyais bien quel avantage se tire de l'honneur et de la richesse. I see the clear advantages of what can be pulled from honor and wealth, et qu'il me faudrait en abandonner la poursuite. And that would have make me abandon this pursuit of this uncertain good. Si je voulais m'appliquer sérieusement à quelques entreprises nouvelles, if I would like to apply myself seriously to a new enterprise, en cas que la félicité suprême y fut continue, in which this felicity is contained, je devrais donc renoncer à la posséder. I need to renounce these goods and the advantages of honor and wealth. En cas, au contraire, qu'elle n'y fut continue, in the case that this pursuit does not have this supreme felicity, un attachement exclusif à ces avantages me la faisait perdre également. The idea that I have the feeling that in these certain goods, there is actually no supreme felicity, the attachment to these advantages will make me lose it as well. Mon âme s'inquiétait donc de savoir s'il était possible, par contre, d'instituer une vie nouvelle. My soul is troubled, therefore, to know if it is possible by encounter to establish a new life, ou du moins d'acquérir une certitude touchant cette institution sans changer l'ordre ancien ni la conduite ordinaire de ma vie, or to acquire at least a certitude touching this establishment without changing the ancient or the old order nor the ordinary conduct of my life. So it's like, okay, do I really need to give up the way that I live so that I can have this like philosophical pursuit? And he doesn't say it explicitly here that's a philosophical pursuit, but trust me, unless you want to read the text yourself, he makes it clear that this is the philosophical pursuit. So it's the idea that like, you know, oh, do I have to live in exile like a lot of philosophers? So I need to be executed, exiled, or basically be a person who never showers and lives in a library. Oh my god. The idea here is basically like, what do you actually have to give up? What is the level of sacrifice essentially that needs to be made so that you can actually achieve this new way of life? Because it's this idea of like all or nothing, right? The extreme of like the veritable and like the mixed. The pursuit in and of itself needs to be as pure as this thing that you're trying to arrive at. So it's gonna get a bit clearer why it is that we cannot have such a compromise. Je l'ai tenté souvent en vain. So I have attempted this often in vain. Les occurrences les plus fréquentes dans la vie, celles que les hommes ainsi qu'ils ressortent de toutes les œuvres, prises comme étant le souverain bien, se ramènent en effet à trois objets. The most common occurrences in life, and when he says occurrences, again, it's in the video that I recommended, but every object and every idea is a cause. So the occurrences is basically when your conatus, like your desire, your being, confronts these causes and these occurrences that affect your soul. Prise comme étant le souverain bien, what is taken to be the sovereign or supreme good, actually leads back to three things: wealth, honor, and pleasure of the senses. Richesse, honneur, plaisir de sens. Or, chacun d'eux distrait l'âme de toute pensée relative à un autre bien. Or, each of these distracts the spirit of all thought relative to another good, the uncertain good. Dans le plaisir, l'âme est suspendue comme si elle eût trouvé un bien où se reposer. In the pleasure, the soul is suspended as if it has found a good where it can rest. Elle est donc au plus haut point empêchée de penser à un autre bien. Pleasure is probably the thing that suspends us most from actually thinking about the other good. So, okay, before I actually continue this, the thing that's really interesting here about pleasure is that I think I recently said to someone that like, yeah, I said this to this like new artist friend that I made. We just went to an exhibition for Kandinsky, which was extremely disappointing. But, you know, before se quitter, before like separating ways, I basically said like, I think it's very important to reach like the highest point of suffering. And I said like, you know, this is an idea that I heard from Nietzsche way back when I was listening to philosophy podcasts, but like had no real ambition in philosophy. It was just this idea that for every time we add something to reduce the suffering that we have, we never get to the point of actually going like, I need to change. C'est plus supportable. It is no longer bearable. Because you imagine that if you make your suffering bearable, you're just going to suffer, but just in a lower degree and never actually escape this suffering. So the idea here, and this is just my, you know, mélange or like my take on this, is the idea that like this is the threat of pleasure, where it is that you are suspended, and he didn't say here like from suffering because that comes after, but it's the idea that it distracts you from something that could actually be much better for you because you are content with how it is that you can raise the level of pleasure that you have in relation to the suffering, the bad, and in that way you will not try to find or envision something that is truly good for you. So continuing on, which is imagine this highest suspension, just spatially imagine this highest suspension of the soul. Après la jouissance, d'autre part, vient une extrême tristesse qui, si elle ne suspend pas la pensée, la trouble et l'amuse. After jouissance, and this is like an example they always use, which is like post-coitus, so after, you know, some fun, sexy time, is actually extreme sadness. So after the fun comes this extreme fall from, you know, wherever it is that you were suspended. And if you don't actually like try to distract yourself with more pleasures, you know, to actually avoid this fall, this is exactly what it is that troubles and blunts the soul. You can see how it is that physical pleasure leads to no fulfillment because you desire something, you achieve this pleasure, and then once you achieve it, it's a lack. It's this need to resuspend your judgment. You want to continually suspend your thought so that you will not experience this extreme sadness. So there was this other thing that I just cut off because I thought it was going to be too long, but there's something to be noted for both wealth and honor. So wealth, it is an accumulated joy, and it is something that excites the soul based on its accumulation. So honor, it's like, oh, the more awards you win, you know, or, you know, wealth, like obviously the more wealth that you have. There's always more money you can earn. There's no sense of real completion, and there's no cap. And the thing about honor, so, you know, clout, right? There's this thing that he wrote, and I just think it's better to just say what he wrote, which is, he says that honor, it is un grand empêchement, which is basically a big impediment. Diriger sa vie, to live one's life, d'après de manière de voir des hommes. C'est-à-dire fuir ce qu'ils fuient communément et chercher ce qu'ils cherchent. So to escape or to run away from what everyone else runs away from, and to search what everyone's searching for. So like when you think of influencers sometimes, like the ones who like do really well for the algorithm or like serve the needs of like every single person that comes onto their channel and somehow makes everyone happy, which is impossible. This is why I'm still really, again, thankful, grateful, and surprised by how much my work resonates, because for the most part, I can't write what I don't think is interesting, which gets me into trouble at university as well. But at the same time, like, this is why, for the most part, I can look back on videos that I made like a year or 2 years ago and be extremely proud of them, because I made genuinely what I thought was interesting and genuinely what I thought was helpful. In this way, like, to search for honor, and for the most part, is actually against one's conatus, because you are basically aligning yourself based on other people's rhythm. So there's this concept about like rapport et mouvement, and how it is that that comes into, you know, the proportion of how it is that it fluctuates the soul. But I don't have the time to get into the details of that. But there's actually this quote that I can share about how it is that he describes self-heating as a complete paradox. And yeah, maybe I'll make that for a members only video, but if this idea of how it is that one's conatus suffering within society, you can watch my video on epistemology, which is called Psychiatry, Is It a Science That Dehumanizes? Where I talk a little bit about how it is that when one is confronted with making a lot of compromises against one's nature, it is actually this thing that we don't quite yet call human suffering, but social conditioning that does change or transform the person in a way, the subject in a way. So let me just recap the issue with wealth, honor, and physical pleasure. Physical pleasure, we don't have this eternal or continuous joy because every time you experience jouissance or enjoyment, sadness. And then for wealth, you never actually reach the end and you're always afraid if you're going to lose your money. So you're always in this fear. And I think like, you know, with rich people, how do you talk about the truth without throwing anyone under the bus? What I'm going to say is that what I believe governs rich people is their fear of losing money. And then you can say like the fear of losing honor in relation to losing money. But what I'm just trying to say is that there is a predictability of what they are driven by. But I think like one of the biggest freedoms that you can have in life is in the face of someone like trying to buy you, just be unaffected. And that is a level of unpredictability and a level of freedom that is an extreme privilege, but at the same time, what are your options outside of being a slave to this capacity of being bought? So that is deeper than I thought it would be, but yeah, that's wealth. And then for honor, again, yes, as you can get honors, you can get Emmys, you can get awards, but once the people turn against you, it's game over. And, you know, to try to maintain like this status or this like place in society as your joy, there's too much preoccupation to want to remain like ranked number one, like voted number one or most listened to, most watched, that, you know, your soul is never really at peace. I think we're moving away from this need for validation from social media, but I'm just saying that everyone can relate to this feeling of honor based on the amount of followers and likes you have on any social media. And if you don't have social media, I guess you're one of the lucky ones who have chosen to actually maintain the serenity and the harmony of your soul. So let me just finish off with the last paragraph, which is voyons donc que ces objets sont un obstacle à l'entreprise d'instituer une vie nouvelle. So seeing that these objects are an obstacle to the undertaking of instituting a new life, the philosopher's life, que même il y a entre eux et elles une opposition telle qu'il faille nécessairement renoncer soit aux unes, soit à l'autre. So basically what he's saying is that even within these three, they are also demanding that you would have to renounce or put aside two of them to really obtain one of them, because the level of focus to try to maintain a continuous joy out of these three things that I explained to you, how it's extremely difficult to maintain its eternity, its sense of continuity, is the thing that actually shows that it is not only an obstacle to this pursuit of the establishment of a new life, the philosopher's life, but in fact it is also an obstacle between the three of them. So it's just extremely demanding and in a way, I guess, impossible. J'étais contraint de chercher quel parti était le plus utile. Il semblait en effet, je l'ai dit, que je voulusse pour en bien incertain, en perdre incertain. So now it's just like, wait a minute, which is actually more helpful? The one that doesn't actually lead to happiness, because it's clear that those three don't actually lead to continuous happiness, and there are massive fears that comes with even when you achieve this happiness. And the thing that he said from the very beginning, which is, I wanted to lose something that was uncertain for something that was certain. So what is uncertain now is these three things that to me before had advantages, that now when I look at it, it's pretty uncertain what kind of advantages that it offers me. So now, what is actually truly certain? And it just doesn't seem to be these three options. Avec un peu d'attention toutefois, j'ai reconnu d'abord que si. So before we said at first sight, this pursuit of the life of the philosopher, the philosophical life, seems reckless, but now, avec d'attention, when I actually truly broke down these three advantages of these three goods, toutefois, j'ai reconnu d'abord que si renoncer à ces objets, je m'attachais à l'institution d'une nouvelle vie, j'ai abandonné un bien incertain de sa nature, comme il ressort clairement des observations ci-dessus, pour un bien incertain. So I realized before that if I renounce these objects, pleasure of the senses, wealth, and honor, I will attach myself to this institution of a new life, and I will abandon this uncertain good of its nature. The fact that these three goods are actually uncertain and actually helping me achieve the veritable good, as we have seen clearly from the given observations, for a bien incertain. So like, wait, we give up like uncertain good for an uncertain good, but it continues. Non du tout de sa nature. So this bien incertain that we're talking about is actually uncertain not by its nature, as in it is certainly a good. Puisque j'en cherchais un inébranlable, because I am looking for the unshakable, the unmovable, the eternal. There is this term called appetite, and there's this thing called desire. Appetite is when we do not use our reason to identify whether or not it is actually truly what we desire. So as people, we might have the appetite for a lot of things that are not actually particularly good for us. It's kind of like you go to a candy shop and you have the appetite to want all the sweet stuff. But then your reason or your desire could be just to have one sweet thing. So the idea here is that with attention, with reason, with considering, I then now truly get to think about what it is that I want, because you are deliberating based on the fact that you said that you wanted something certain. And what part of it do you want it to be certain? Do you want to be certain about the fact that you will, and this is anticipating, but you want to be certain about whether or not you will ever come across wealth, whether you ever come across, the pleasures of honor or physical pleasure? Or is what you want to be certain the fact that it is certainly good for you in an eternal, not vain and not futile way? So what I'm trying to highlight here is the word uncertain here for uncertain good is not linked to its nature, mais seulement quant à son attente, but only in regards to its attainment. So you can do philosophy all that you want. Will you actually achieve this ideal or this veritable good? We don't know. And that is the uncertain thing. The uncertain thing is that we don't know if we'll get there, but we know that, or we believe to be certain that in comparison to what is offered to us in terms of the daily occurrences of real life, those things aren't certain goods. They're certain in terms of the fact that you will encounter them, but it's proven certainly that they do not actually bring you lasting joy or happiness. Une méditation plus prolongée me convainquit ensuite que dès lors, si seulement je pouvais réfléchir à fond, j'abandonnais un mal certain pour un bien certain. A more prolonged meditation convinced me from this point that if only I could reflect thoroughly, that I would be abandoning a certain bad for a certain good. Yeah. So this is why I'm in Delulu, that what I'm doing is actually great and uncertain, but certain. So I hope this encourages you to think more profoundly on your choices in life and then have your existential crisis. This is like now like a prologue, but I just had a class today which is like so funny. The professor is amazing. Basically, Descartes says that like you have to have a long meditation at least once in your life, like put everything to question at least once in your life. We make jokes about having an existential crisis. I think it's a crisis because, what we said before, like we have suspended our soul or our thought for a really long time in terms of all these pleasures that we can afford to buy and purchase. And the last thing I'll leave you with is this profound joke that the professor said, which is, with Socrates, the model of truth is l'accouchement. So basically like giving birth, or you ask questions and then, the ignorant can start like re-memorizing or re-realizing or re-remembering all the knowledge that they actually have inside of them. I don't know if I can like beat this out, but it's like, that's how you get demonetized, but whatever. Okay, it starts with basically killing your inner child, or your child that has been filled with all the préjugés, like the prejudgment, the prejudices that have been taught to you by your parents and every person who has thought for you in your place. So the idea here is that the model of truth starts with you renouncing everything that you've been taught to know as truth so that you can start thinking for yourself. Okay, I hope this was helpful and I'll talk to you soon.